Hey guys, this is Abdullah and this is my detailed analysis of the Nokia X20's main camera. Now I'm going to try and make this as easy as possible to understand for anybody, but I would still recommend checking out my photography tutorial. You can find the link for that in the description down below or in the cards up above. Once again, I'm going to have to ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying my content. It really helps me grow, and leaving a comment doesn't hurt as well. So let me start by talking about the specifications of the hardware of the main camera on the X20. What you need to know from all these numbers is that despite this phone sharing the same number of megapixels as the big brother 8.3, it's actually a completely different sensor that's smaller in size. Now the X20 is using a brand new Samsung ISOCELL sensor versus an OmniVision sensor found on the 8.3. It has an aperture of f1.79, so it's a larger ratio than the one found on the 8.3, but it is smaller overall. The individual pixel size on the X20 is approximately 15% smaller than the one found on the 8.3. So generally speaking, it is a smaller sensor than on its big brother. Having said that, it is capable of going up to 12,800 ISO compared to 6,400 ISO on the 8.3. So that should give it a small advantage when it comes to being able to gather light. Let me start with what I really like about the X20's camera performance. First of all, in daylight, I really like the image processing that's been applied to the images. This is to say that the processing is very natural, and the best way for me to describe the images is that they're quite pure. Exactly the opposite of over-processed. So the phone knows that it has quite a capable sensor, and it doesn't try to ruin the images with its own processing. It just lets the sensor sort of have fun. So the end result is images that look very natural, the color processing is spot on, and it also gives you a very nice template for you to edit the images later. And then because the sensor size is quite large, the phone is also capable of producing very nice natural bokeh effects. Because the phone doesn't tend to over sharpen the images, something that the 8.3 suffers from, the 2x zoom is actually much more usable because of this. Do keep in mind that 2x zoom is just the phone cropping from the sensor, so it's not as good as having a dedicated telephoto camera, but the images are still quite usable. And then there's the dynamic range, which I'm really happy with on the Nokia X20. I did find that it kind of find a very nice balance between trying to get details in the shadows as well as in the highlights. This is also helped by the HDR tuning, which is also finely tuned that it doesn't overstep its boundaries, but at the same time it does its job really well. The daylight images also look satisfying because they're tuned to be a bit brighter than what you can find on devices like the 9 Purview, for example. I also found that this phone processes the night sky a bit better than on the 8.3 because it doesn't try and tamper and get details where it's very hard to find details. So it just leaves the sky alone, looking black, which looks much better actually when you're viewing the pictures. And then I can't talk about this camera without mentioning that it has quite a rich suite for pro controls. So if you're one of those people that likes to tamper around with the images and choose the exact settings, you'll really like what you can actually get out of the sensor. These pro controls are very easy to use thanks to the interface, and you can also capture raw images. The raw images, as well as the natural processing, means that you'll be able to capture and edit nice looking images out of this phone. To sum up how I feel about the daylight images, I think I prefer the images captured on the X20 over the 8.3 despite having a smaller sensor, and this all comes down to the more natural processing of the images. Okay, so I've got all the good out of the way, and now let's focus about the weaknesses of this phone's camera. Sadly, what I really like about the way this phone handles daylight images actually comes to bite it when it comes to low light images. In low light images, because of the natural processing and the phone's very hands-off approach to processing, it doesn't apply enough noise reduction. And because the phone is tuned to try and produce bright looking images even in auto mode, it chooses very high ISO settings that are only exaggerating this problem. Like if you were to ask me, I would have tuned the ISO settings a bit lower, got a more ambient looking image, as opposed to an image that looks bright but adds more noise. Of course, this is a personal preference. I think a lot of people might be happy with how bright the images look in auto, even in low light. But for me, I prefer the processing of the images in low light on the 8.3, which tries to keep the ambience of the scene a lot better. So for comparison's sake, I found that the 8.3 produced images that had between 20 and 30% lower ISO compared to this, both on auto. And also because of physics, the smaller sensor size on the X20 also means that it struggles a lot more trying to capture details in very dimly lit situations. Night mode does work, and I feel like it's been improved since I first got the phone, but the images produced in night mode still aren't as good as the ones you can capture with the 8.3. And I still feel like the HDR is still tuned a bit too much, specifically when you use night mode. So the images end up looking a bit too colorful for my liking. As for video, I'm very happy with what this phone is able to produce, even though the resolution is limited to 1080p. The software stabilization is excellent. The audio quality captured in the video is really good.
Even just holding your phone up against your head for maybe 20 minutes and it would be quite toasty.
There is dual sight mode, which I found to be more of a gimmick. It captures feed from the front camera and the back camera at the same time, or you can use the ultra wide camera as well. It works quite well, but it's not something that I'd personally use at all. But just like the 8.3, the phone still struggles in low light video situations. More expensive phones will definitely handle the noise better and definitely handle light flickering better. So do keep that in mind. Dynamic range in video is quite good, and I really like having cinema mode. Despite me wanting more aspect ratios. I know it's called cinema mode for 21:9 aspect ratio, but giving these manual controls over video and the ability to change the aspect ratio would, I think, add a lot of value to this phone. So I hope that's implemented. I know I haven't talked much about the ultra wide camera and the rest of the cameras on the back, but honestly, there's not much to say. They just capture images that are just barely acceptable for social media. You need a lot of light to get anything good out of the ultra wide camera. In anything other than ideal situations, the image is way too noisy and doesn't capture enough resolved detail. So if you want to buy this phone, don't get it if you care a lot about the ultra wide camera. It's just not worth it. All right, so let's conclude. I feel like the theme on the camera on the X20 is less is more. The phone doesn't try and get in the way of you capturing really nice looking images, especially in daylight. The processing is very natural. I like the HDR effect, which also isn't over exaggerated. The colors look quite good and real to life. And even if you don't want to capture raw images, you can still edit pictures and get very nice looking images out of the X20's camera. And for people who like having manual controls, this phone is also perfect because of the way it processes images and because of the ease of use of using these manual controls. With low light, the X20 tries too hard to capture bright images, and this comes at the expense of quality. I would have personally tuned things a bit differently, but then again, I'm aiming for a more ambient look, especially for low light situations, and this phone I feel appeals to the mass market in this regard by producing brighter than needed images. The video capabilities on the X20 are quite good, as I mentioned. You'll be able to capture nice looking video with very excellent audio as well, and the manual controls are also a very big added bonus for a device in this price category. But once again, the phone also struggles in low light situations, especially when it comes to handling noise. So that still remains a weak point here. Anyways, that's it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.